calling the meeting to order. I'm going to hit continue here, acknowledging the meeting is being recorded. And just, I guess a note on Zoom. I know we've kind of been doing this for a while, but I think if you're not, I believe the rule is if you don't have video enabled, we're not going to be able to take comments. So you need to try and have your video enabled if you're going to provide comments during the course of the meeting. And so, yeah, let's kick us off. Kate, do you mind bringing the agenda up for folks? Or should I do that? All right, so we'll kick off with the meeting minutes from last meeting. Hopefully you all had a chance to review those. They looked good to me. Thanks to Brian for taking those notes and pulling them together. If I can get someone to make a motion to approve those, we can go through that process, or if there are any feedback or questions or amendments that people want to make.
I'll move to accept the minutes.
Thank you, Warren. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ruthie. All right, everyone, can we vote to approve the minutes? The CAB members, raise your hand. Okay, great. Minutes are approved. So upcoming meeting dates, this is an area that wanted to connect with folks on. Kate is not going to be available to join us on January 20th. And I know we have a school vacation week, the week of February 17th. So I'm trying to get a sense from folks if we might be able to reschedule, unfortunately, both of those meetings. We're hoping in the January meeting to have an update from Kate on the 2019 greenhouse gas inventory, at least what she is able to update in terms of kind of the built environment, since we probably won't have any mobility data. So I think it would be great to have her participate. And then I know personally I won't be able to join on the 17th. So I'm hoping we can move that. So some suggestions would be for the January 20th meeting, if we were to reschedule, we could move it to the next week, which would be January 27th would be the Wednesday, or we could look at like the Tuesday or Thursday before or after that. I don't know if folks are ready to provide, availability. It would be great to try and nail down new dates, but if you're not able to do that, we can try and arrange it, I guess, via email. So do folks are you able to check your schedules and see if for the January meeting, if we can push it to January 27th?
I can do January 27th.
Okay, Ruthie can do that.
Same. I can do January 27th.
I can as well.
Okay, great.
I can as well, Jake.
Okay, thank you, Michael. All right, I think that will get us to critical mass. And Brian, once you can confirm, just let us know. But we'll plan on the 27th. And then what about for February? Does, assuming Wednesdays still work well for people, does the Wednesday the 24th work, or perhaps the Thursday the 25th?
I can do either of those dates.
Okay.
I can as well, as long as it remains 6 to 8.
Okay. Yep. That's the plan.
Yeah,
I can do Wednesday.
Okay, Wednesday. All
I'm
right.
okay with as well, Jake.
Okay. So we'll plan to reschedule both of those then. Thank you, guys. All right. So Just a quick update from my perspective on in terms of the chair's update. We did some work to evaluate candidates because we have a couple of openings on CAB, and we're actually happy to say that we have a nomination in process, but unfortunately weren't able to bring Scott on board for this meeting. So he's just joining as a member of the public. But Scott Wood is on the call and I think is on video now. Hello, Scott. And he's been at the Environmental Defense Fund for a number of years, I think 9 or 10 years, and he heads up the Climate Corps program there. He lives in Concord and has a ton of experience in that space and working in Climate Corps, which is an amazing program for folks who aren't deeply familiar with it. Staples actually had a Climate Corps program fellow a number of years ago, and they were terrific and really helped identify some great opportunities for us. So anyway, that's working through the process. I won't have Scott introduce himself tonight, but we will make sure he has a chance to introduce himself and also get to know all of us through a round of introductions, hopefully in January when we convene again. But just wanted to share that news.
That's
And
great.
otherwise-
Welcome, Scott. Nice to see you virtually. Happy to have you.
Thanks. And otherwise, I didn't have any updates that I was planning on going through tonight. So I think we can jump to Kate's update.
Great, thanks. So I sent around my director's update on Friday, but I'll just share a couple highlights. I'm excited to share that the select board approved unanimously a new sustainable fleet policy on Monday night, and that I sent around the text of that. But that's one of the steps in our climate action plan was to update our fleet policy to be an electric first policy. So the idea is that, with any new vehicle purchase, departments will first consider a fully electric option. If that's not possible, plug-in electric, and then hybrid and a conventional vehicle as kind of the last option there. So really pleased that that's done and accepted and in place. The select board was really positive in their feedback about that policy. So pretty exciting. And we're already kind of working on implementing that policy. We deployed 3 new Nissan Leafs in the last month. One is for the driver's ed program, which I think is particularly exciting because now teenagers will get to drive an electric vehicle and get to experience that firsthand as part of driver's ed. And then the last thing is just that the middle school building committee has restarted again. It was paused in the spring because of the pandemic, but it regrouped and we had 1 meeting so far. The next meeting will be early January. So I'll keep you posted on that as I was last year when the meetings were ongoing. So we'll keep you updated on that. And I think that's it. Any questions?
Kate, on the leasing, the fleet, when is that effective? When is the first, for everybody that contracts for a lease starting, what, in 21? Is that when it begins?
The policy goes into effect on January 1st. So it's not specific to leasing, it's to any vehicle, any new vehicle for the town, so leases or purchases. And the policy goes into effect January 1st.
Great. Is there any sense of when we would have a tipping point, let's say 50% of all of the either leased or purchased vehicles in the fleet would be all electric? Where are we on that spectrum?
Yeah, it's a good question. One of the things that is noted in the policy, but also something that is in our climate action plan and that I'm working on now is doing a fleet electrification study. And so then that would look at our existing fleet, what what are the possibilities for electrifying, when those vehicles are replaced? What does that schedule look like? What's the necessary charging infrastructure going to be? So when we do that study, I think we'll have a better answer to your question in terms of kind of like, when can we reach that tipping point in terms of a certain percentage electric? So I'm working on that with the town manager and some department heads right now, and we'll be moving forward with that early next year.
Excellent. That sounds great.
I just want to say, I think it's fantastic that student drivers are going to drive an electric vehicle. I mean, that is like, worth so much, because most of them probably would not even consider that or even get into one or know what they are. And then they can tell their parents that they were driving an electric vehicle. So that's a brilliant idea. That's great.
Other questions or comments for Kate? All right, we are moving right along ahead of schedule. Is Alice do you want to start with the update, or Kate for the RMI accelerator?
Alice, do you want to give a quick update?
Sure, you can help me out if I've missed something or misrepresented something. At the last CAB meeting, I believe the CAB voted to support the non-binding resolution and to take it as an initiative for 2020, or whatever year this is, 2020-21, and take it to the select board. And that was with the understanding that the RMI team was going to first make sure that we don't surprise our elected officials, and we would be meeting with Tammy Gouveia and Mike Barrett. We met with Tammy, and it was a fantastic meeting, very productive. I think we met for about an hour. We heard her concerns, we heard what was happening with the legislature, and in the end, she said these steps would be helpful to her and her agenda with the legislature. So that was a good vote of support for us to go forward. We have a similar meeting scheduled with Mike Barrett just after the Christmas holiday. And I think at that point, if we have his support as well, I sort of see a few steps for the CAB, if you're, for how to take this to the select board. And I think I saw some select board members listening in tonight. The first would be to make sure the language works for everybody. And I think there was some agreement that the language was pretty good at this point. It would be to see if you could get on the agenda for the select board early in January, and to present it to them with a background of, with why CAB is bringing this forward. And hopefully the select board, if you provide the language of the non-binding resolution in advance, they will receive it as a packet of information, and may be able to vote on that night to support this. It's very much in line with the letter that I believe got sent from the select board to the legislature supporting the work of the conference committee. And so many of these, they're the same kind of things that are involved in that letter that the select board signed. And then the CAB and allies in town, CSAC, maybe, the RMI team certainly would help to socialize the non-binding resolution through town, so people know that this is something that the select board have engaged in and have sent to the legislature. The next big step is for us to, I don't know, maybe Kate, you can remember, did the CAB vote to support or to take the home rule petition as well as an agenda item for the coming year?
No.
Okay, so that would be the next big step. There are some important dates to keep in mind for the home rule petition. The town preview meeting is scheduled for February 27th. That's the meeting that alerts all town officials that there are warrant articles that will be coming up from wherever they are around town, either boards, committees, or citizens. And then it looks like the warrant opens somewhere around then too, maybe even the same day. But all the draft warrant articles are due March 19th. So at that point, we have to make sure the language of the home rule petition is in good order, reviewed by town council and ready to go forward for public hearings and into the town warrant. So that's my update, and those are the steps that I think we need to take going forward. So maybe is it at this meeting we can decide if the CAB wants to move forward with the home rule petition as well as part of the strategy? Or does that have to happen at another meeting?
I think it should be on the agenda. The CAB's
Okay.
going to vote on that. So I would say that should happen in January.
Okay, so if CAB votes in January, I think the meeting was just scheduled for the 27th.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, so that would be with a month before it would go to the town preview meeting. So hopefully in that month, we can finalize the language of the home rule petition if that's what you've decided to do.
And in terms of the next steps on the non-binding resolution, I can work on, requesting time with the select board to walk through that resolution. And I think we just, we can I can request that, but obviously we'd want to try and get the feedback from Mike Barrett in terms of his feedback and make any adjustments needed kind of before that meeting, but happy to set that up.
That's great. I think Kate can let the board know. Hopefully you'll be at that meeting with Mike Barrett. I think she should agree to attend so she can inform the board of the outcome of that meeting.
Okay.
I'll be there.
Okay, I think and we have another RMI meeting tomorrow. I'm not sure the agenda on this one. Kate, do you know?
I don't.
Okay. Bound to be good. Accelerator workshop number 7. Can't quite tell what it is.
Any questions or comments for Alice or Kate from CAB? I'm not sure I can see everyone, so please speak up if you do have a question. Okay. Well, thanks for the update. And I think we can now move on to hear from Dave and Laura from the Concord Municipal Light Plant. They have kindly offered to give us an overview of the light plant's decarbonization strategy. And I know I am very excited to hear more about the strategy and learn, and really appreciate their time and expertise. And I will hand it over to them once we get the presentation set up, and they'll take us through.
Well, thanks for having us. We appreciate it. We got a little slide deck that we're going to go through, and then we'll answer any questions that you may have as we go along. So I'm going to hand it over to Laura so she can go through this, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, members of the Climate Advisory Action Board, for inviting us to come talk with you tonight. We know how important the decarbonization of the town's power supply is to the town's carbon reduction goals. And we're looking forward to discussing that with you tonight and answering your questions. In addition to talking specifically about the power supply, I'm hoping to touch on as well some other efforts that CMLP has undertaken in the past and is undertaking today to also help reduce carbon emissions within the town. So if you go to the first slide. So I think first we'll just kind of cover a high level, very 90,000 foot decarbonization strategy, sort of the framework of it. And then many of these other touch points were very helpfully brought to our attention by Kate as things that CAB wanted to discuss. So I've tried to at least touch on each of them, and hopefully we will have covered many of the areas that you have questions about. The first one is about in-town solar, primarily behind the meter, and also solar rebates. Another topic is how CMLP purchases power. Another, the implementation of contracted power purchases that include RECs, with the interim strategy of purchasing what we call non-associated RECs. progress we've made from our perspective on the decarbonization strategy. And then, as I mentioned, the programs that we also offer that we believe help reduce carbon emissions. So if we go to the next slide, sort of the very, as I said, high level plan is to provide 100% non-emitting electricity by 2030, which was voted on at the 2017 annual town meeting. So the way that we plan to do this is to both purchase generation that come with RECs that we will retire. But for that portion of the portfolio that's either already forward committed contractually with emitting power, or for power that we are unable to secure from qualifying generation that come with associated RECs, that we would purchase non-associated RECs to cover the deficient portion. Another broad strategy is to invest in-town solar generation and to provide rebates and incentives to support beneficial electrification and energy efficiency. With respect to in-town solar generation, to date, these individual blue bars here show the annual additions in kilowatts of DC capacity. And then the red line is the cumulative total from the addition of all of the individual bars. So if you look over to 2020 year to date, you can see that that red line is almost at the 4,000 kilowatt level, which is the same thing as 4 megawatts. So we currently have almost 4 megawatts of behind the meter residential and non-residential solar PV generating capacity on our system. We have an additional 6.4 megawatts of third-party owned, what we call PPA solar. That's PPA stands for Purchase Power Agreement. So this is the solar that we purchased from the Kearsarge facility at Walden Pond and
W.R. Grace.
Thank you, W.R. Grace. I'm missing the word. So if you add the two of those together, the current total is about 10.2 megawatts. Dave, do you want to speak at all to? Oh, did somebody ask a question?
Okay, what were you saying, Laura?
Did you want to speak to the older study of potential solar capacity that was published some years ago?
Yeah, I think it was back in 2011. The Light Board adopted a solar strategy to have 25 megawatts of in-town solar on our system. And we haven't reviewed that strategy in a number of years. And, you know, as Laura said, you know, we currently have 10.2 megawatts. And, you know, if we are going to try and get to that 25, battery storage is going to become a major player for us because our loads are so low at certain periods of the year. And, you know, we have like maybe 2 megawatts of load on one transformer and 5 on the other. And just to put it into perspective, each transformer can handle 70 megawatts of load. So when the solar's pumping and the load is low, we almost are going to push back to the transmission system. And if that happens, we actually can't do that and the system would shut off. So that's why we're starting to look at battery storage and, you know, we're going to have to reevaluate the 2011 document for the solar strategy. So if you've seen that, that is a little outdated and it does need to be updated.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Were you just saying that we were thinking about having 25 megawatts, but as a town, we don't need that?
Yeah, we currently don't have a need for 25 megawatts. But as load grows, you know, we want to continue to incentivize solar. But in order for us to continue doing that, we need to add a battery storage to help with those valleys where the load is so low. We do have, you know, 10 megawatts of solar producing. And so if you think about that 10 megawatts, plus the 7 megawatts, the 5 and the 2 I mentioned earlier, there's a total of 17 megawatts of load at the low points in the year. And so with that solar producing like we want it to, we have to add a battery storage device, and that'll allow us to take that battery, charge it during those low load periods, and actually discharge it during the peaks. So there's a savings to all the ratepayers, the transmission and capacity peaks. So that's what we're doing. But I think it's important for everyone to understand that the solar strategy is 10 years old and does need to be reevaluated.
Great,
Next
thank
slide. So a little bit, not a lot of detail, but a little bit of detail on how CMLP purchases power. We enter into forward commitments with generators ranging from 1 hour in advance of when the power is to be delivered to 20 years or more for energy, capacity, and transmission. When we go out and look to buy new resources, particularly renewable resources that would come with associated certificates, we typically go as part of a buying consortium. CMLP is an equity owner in an energy services company called Energy New England, and many other municipal electric utilities in Massachusetts and other states use Energy New England as their buying agent. And this helps us a lot because most renewable projects are not financially feasible except at some scale, whether that's even as low as 25 or 50 megawatts. But CMLP can't buy 50 megawatts worth of power. We don't need 50 megawatts. We just want a small slice, like maybe 2 megawatts or even less. And so when we go in with a whole bunch of other buyers and we can approach a potential developer, we can offer them to commit to forward contract out the entire quantity of their project, and that helps them finance it. So that's just sort of a strategy that we have for forward buying power. And then there's not quite yet, Dave. I always get questions about RECs and how they trade. The renewable energy certificate is a separate attribute of power. It's different from energy, it's different from capacity, it's not transmission. It's another beast, and it can be traded separately. So a developer could sell the energy from their wind facility to one party, the capacity to a second party, and the renewable energy certificates to a third party. These certificates trade in arrears. And so, for example, we will not know how many 2020 renewable energy certificates that we will buy for 2020 until June of next year. You can see that the last quarter of generation, the certificates aren't even minted, which means they're not even created until April of 2021. And then the trading window would be from April to June. So we won't know until June of next year how renewable, if you will, our 2020 generation was. Okay, next slide.
Do you always purchase recent RECs, or under the state's RPS, the utilities can satisfy them with pretty old RECs, I think back to like 2008.
So our REC purchasing program is still fairly new. We just began collecting collecting for and purchasing RECs in 2018. So far, we've always made the decision to buy current year renewable energy certificates. So for 2018, we only bought 2018 RECs. For 2019, we're only buying 2019 RECs. Whether that strategy would change in the future, I can't say for certain, but that's what we're doing right now.
Thanks.
So the question about how do we decide how much we're going to buy of associated RECs versus non-associated RECs? And the basic strategy is we're going to try to purchase as much, and I'm going to call this reasonably priced, and we'll obviously have to pause later for a definition, generation that come with associated RECs. that either is available or can be sponsored. I mean, we're literally scouring, to try to find projects that we can invest in. However, to the extent that the quantity of contracted power purchases that include RECs does not meet 100% of our sales, then we will go ahead and purchase and retire non-associated Massachusetts Class 1 RECs equal to the difference, limited by rates. We'll talk a little bit more about how rates limit the quantity of RECs that we can buy. But that limitation is really just on an annual basis. And in the long run, if the amount we were collecting in rates was not sufficient to meet the 100% renewable goal, then it's certainly within the purview and power of the CMLP board to increase rates as needed in order to meet our obligations and our goals. Dave, do you want to make a comment about reasonably priced?
Sure. So, we have, a fiduciary responsibility to try and keep rates reasonably priced for, our customers in Concord. And so we evaluate opportunities, and we do pay a premium for some of the renewable projects that we've been a part of. And we're okay with doing that to an extent. I can't get into the specific numbers, but if someone, and this has happened before, where someone has come to us because they understand Concord's goals and gave us a really inflated price, and we turned them away because we could not pay that premium. It was 3 times what we're paying on other renewable contracts. And so we're looking at each opportunity, and we want to make sure that we won't have rate shock from one contract alone. And so far, we've had good luck with that. We have a number of renewable contracts in the portfolio, but they're also all reasonably priced.
Thank you.
So, sorry, can I ask a clarifying question? So if CMLP is trying to meet 100% of our energy, through buying RECs or whatever, we're buying RECs of a certain percentage of our energy, and we can't buy RECs at the price that we had been buying, then we buy them at a higher price to hit the goal, which I understand then would raise rates. Is that what you're saying?
So I'm not specifically just talking about RECs, talking about renewable contracts with RECs. There's 2 pieces.
Okay.
The REC, just purchasing RECs for to decarbonize the portion of the power supply that isn't green is done through the energy charge, which the Light Board votes on. And currently we're collecting a certain amount of funds. The REC prices did go up recently in the last year or so. And so we're not getting as many RECs as we did in 2018 for the same price. But the board has recognized that and adjusted that appropriately, in my opinion. The reasonably priced on contracts is different than that. So we have wind contracts that we consider to be reasonably priced, but they are a higher rate than a typical gas contract. But we've defined what is reasonable. So we know we're going to pay a premium, but we just don't want to pay such a premium that the rates are going to go up significantly. Does that help?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dave, is it the Light Point's sense that where we are today, how much do we have, 60% or 30% or 50% renewable energy of part of the portfolio?
That's part of this next slide, actually.
We're going to talk about it next.
Okay, and the context is as we move out and we go into 80, 90, and 100%, is it the expected strategy or risk that those numbers will be very, very high at that point?
Yes, our goal is to have a carbon-free power supply. That's our goal.
Okay.
So this next slide, which I recognize is busy and difficult to read, but we're trying to convey a pretty decent amount of information here. So if you'll just bear with me, I'll try to walk through some things that look like they don't make sense. The the blue bars at the bottom is the amount of power that either we've already received, if it's up till almost to the end of 2020, or in future years, what we expect to receive from contracts we purchased that come with Massachusetts Class 1 RECs that we will retire, either have retired or will retire. The green is the quantity for which we own main Class 2 RECs. And this is primarily hydro resources, older hydro resources in New England. The pink is a fairly recent addition to the portfolio, but as you can see, it gets to be pretty significant. And these are purchases made from nuclear facilities that come with a corresponding volume of emissions-free energy certificates, or EFECs. What you see in the gray is the difference. Initially, it's the difference between the colored bars at the bottom. So if you go back to 2016, we only had title to 9% of our purchases came from generation to which we owned the RECs and retired it. That means the other 91% came from emitting sources. And back in 2016, we didn't purchase RECs. So we just had 91% emitting, 9% non-emitting. It didn't change much in 2017. Then 2018 is the first year we started buying RECs. And so first of all, if you look at the gray bar up at the top, the whole thing goes up to 100 and it's 89%. 89% is the difference between the 8 plus 3 or 11% at the bottom and 100%. So we would have been 89% emitting. I guess I'm gonna have to put my glasses on because I can't read my own writing. 89% emitting in 2018. However, we purchased the equivalent of 42% of our total power purchases in non-associated Massachusetts Class 1 RECs. So we offset that 89% by 42%. Does that make sense?
So can I ask, what's the difference between the dark blue and the light blue? So the MA Class 1 and then the purchased MA Class 1.
So the blue at the bottom are certificates that come with power purchases that we've made. Those are associated Class 1 RECs.
Okay, and the other ones are not associated. They're just RECs.
Correct.
In the,
yes.
Got it. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
It would be the same as bundled and unbundled. Right?
Yeah, you can use that terminology.
Okay.
In 2022, you can see that the bar stopped going to 100%. And the reason I did this is because right now, if we purchase no other energy, the expectation would be that we would have, we've already committed to 31% that comes from an emitting resource or emitting resources. Okay, there's no getting out of that. We've committed. If we were to purchase no other transactions for that year, the remaining 30%, between roughly 70 and 100, would come from the market, which would likely be gas contracts or emitting. But I didn't want to show that whole bar as 100 because I want you to see what emitting is actually forward committed to and what is in the spot market and can be changed. So the last of our forward commitments for emitting resources end in 2023.
And here's a good place to kind of take a look at 2022. If you took the 44% from 21 of the RECs that we purchased and just said say the market stayed the same and we collected the same amount and put that on 22, that is going to put us up around 80% carbon free.
And if you do that for 2023, you get to 91%. And if you were actually to do that for 2026, you get to 103%.
So this is so helpful. Thank you very much. And if I'm over asking, Jake, let me know. But so if money were not an option, we could now like forward purchase the difference between what the bars are from 2022 and on up to 100%, right? We could.
Mhm.
Okay.
We typically don't forward contract for 100% of what we think our needs will be for a couple reasons. We typically have a declining percentage of forward commitments, and the further out in the future you go, the less we forward purchased. That's in part to help address the increased amount of uncertainty in those future years. You know, we don't actually know what our load is going to be, right? It could go up, it could go down. And we don't really want to be in a situation where we forward committed to take more electricity than we're actually going to need, because then we're going to have to sell it back to the market, potentially at a loss, and that would be borne by ratepayers, which isn't probably a good idea.
And, you know, in addition to that, when we go out for pricing for contracts, you know, this gray section, these are usually 3-year contracts, sometimes 4, because the vendors don't want to go out much further than that. And we don't want to commit much further than that because we could lose an opportunity to buy something that is more attractive to the community.
So can I ask a question about the nuclear purchase there? Because it seems in terms of Concord trying to go 100% emissions free, there's 2 reasons to do that. One is to make us feel good about ourselves and pat ourselves on the back, which isn't the best reason. And then the second is to accomplish something in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the real world. Given that nuclear power is not eligible for the RPS, and the argument always made about buying RECs, even non-associated RECs. I know some people don't think they're so valuable, but I buy the argument, if you buy any RECs, somewhere along the way, it has at least the potential of causing additional renewable energy to get built. I don't see what buying nuclear RECs accomplishes. It seems all it does is give us an opportunity to pat ourselves on the back, but we haven't really reduced emissions in the real world. Am I missing something?
I would respectfully disagree, sir, about that in the following way. Nuclear facilities do get decommissioned. We've seen that in Connecticut. We've seen it in some other jurisdictions. And so without sufficient economics to support them, there is no guarantee that those nuclear facilities are going to remain online. You know, they do produce power without the use of a carbon-based fuel. I'm not going to get into the argument of, you know, do they have other negative impacts, because that's a whole other discussion. And I'm sure people have very, you know, deep beliefs about that. But by supporting, and this is not one nuclear contract that's in this pink, this is represents several different, a number of contracts. But they, in my opinion, by entering into a term commitment for the output from a nuclear facility, you are encouraging it to remain online, and it doesn't have the potential to disappear from the market portfolio potentially forever.
Okay, yeah, I guess I could buy that if we have some evidence that these contracts are really making a difference in terms of whether that facility is staying online or not.
No, building on what Warren is saying is at least as my takeaway as I look at this chart, and there's been a lot of discussion nationally that nuclear needs to be part of this clean energy future, a slice of it, right? When I look at this chart, these numbers are up in the 30 and almost 40% of the portfolio. Does the light plan have any concerns or risk assessments about, depending on that, such a large slice in the event there needs to be a different assessment, or we need to be thinking about going in a different direction because the maneuverability or part of the portfolio that has such a high dominance seems to me would be something you'd be thinking about.
So we do have that type of thing in consideration. And Laura kind of mentioned it earlier. This isn't one contract, it's multiple contracts. And so we try not to put more than 20% into any one contract. That's part of the portfolio process that we follow. And we've done a pretty good job with that overall. But, you know, again, we're looking at multiple contracts in here. And that's the policy that has been established.
Thanks.
I have one clarifying question on the nuclear, and then I guess a comment. Just to clarify, so the nuclear listed here is the actual, like, that's actual power that we're purchasing. We've contracted to purchase from the facilities. This isn't just the certificate that comes along with it, comes with the power as well. Okay. And then I think, you know, recently I've seen some research that indicates that in the US, onshore wind is now the most cost competitive energy generation technology, at least large projects. And I know that, and have seen that, you know, large solar projects as well are increasingly cost competitive. And that's, I think, before some of the subsidies that are in place. I'm just curious if you guys think that there may be more opportunities, you know, as we get into 2022, 2023, particularly if with this administration, you know, if there's some sort of federal carbon tax that comes into play, that maybe that'll open up some projects for, you know, multiple years that, you know, the light plant could invest in, that have, you know, again, come with, it's a wind project that comes with the renewable attributes. I'm just curious about kind of I know you mentioned the complexities of buying, you know, from those projects. I know there's a lot of demand for those from, you know, corporations and utilities as well, so across the country. So I'm just curious about, you know, how you're thinking about that. And we can, if that's something you want to address later, we can hold off. I want to make sure you have time to get through this and other people have time to ask questions.
No, that's fine. We're constantly looking for new carbon-free renewable contracts. E&E, Energy New England, is constantly looking, and we're adding contracts as we go. And that's our philosophy, is to get all renewable contracts. So they've done a good job of finding things that are priced right and negotiating the contracts with the suppliers. So, you know, that is what we're doing. So.
Thanks.
And I would also just say that, you know, even in 2025 and 2026, we still have, you know, over 40% of the power, physical power, has yet to be purchased. And so we're definitely leaving room open and hopeful that as costs come down, that there will be, you know, more opportunities to buy shares of new projects that come with certificates that we can retire. One thing to keep in mind is that many of the places where it's cost effective to build wind, either because of the resource availability or because of the tax structure or whatever, are in places like Maine and other northern areas. And there's currently a pretty big disparity between the volume of supply that wants to come to the load centers. You know, the load is all in Connecticut and Massachusetts, not so much up in Maine. And so all the generators are trying to get that power down here, and there ends up being a very large transmission cost. So while the project might be cost competitive, when you think about it, picking it up in Maine, by the time you get it to Massachusetts, it's not as cost competitive, if you understand what I'm saying. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
And it sounds like your purchasing needs to happen through Energy New England, just because Concord's volume is too small.
It doesn't have to be done through Energy New England, but it's the most cost-effective way to do it. We do have suppliers that come to us and want to, get a purchase power agreement together. And usually the prices are too high because, of the percentage we want to take. But if they went to Energy New England and Energy New England, goes out to the 29 customers that they have and comes back and now we have,
you
20
get a better
megawatts of
price.
load, then it makes sense. And quite frankly, that's how some of the wind projects in Maine got built, was because of the municipal light plants. And you can see them on this slide, and Laura will kind of talk about it, but that's how the projects happen.
Yeah, the question I wanted to ask is, does CMLP or Energy New England engage in forward-looking contracts where you're basically investing in a new project that will come online later, or are you going out for PPAs with existing projects?
It's a mix of both, right? So when we signed up for Spruce, Mountain, Saddleback, and Canton Mountain, those they weren't built, and they wouldn't have been built if E&E's customers didn't, sign up for them. So we've done it that way. And then there's other ones, that have been online for a while that, we're contracted with them for. But we certainly do not shy away from contracting for new projects. And quite frankly, that's what we need to be doing, because there's only so many existing out there that it would be hard to increase our percentage if we weren't investing in new projects.
Thanks.
So this next slide is, we're not going to go through this block by block. It's just meant to show you, this is an actual download from the New England Power Pool, their GIS accounting system. This is the way that the state tracks, the retirement of certificates. And this just shows you, this is a one page worth of many, many pages that shows Concord's activity. And so what you could see here is, over in the second column, it says disposition effective quarter. That refers to the quarter in which the generation was minted. Is it a voluntary retirement? Yes. What is the state that we're in retiring it? We're in Massachusetts. The state it came from is Maine for that, and that first one. So that first one is for, as Dave said, the Spruce Mountain Wind Project. It'll list the certificate numbers, the fuel type, how many RECs, whether it qualifies for Massachusetts Class 1 or Maine Class 2. And this just shows how Concord Municipal Light, this is where you could go to get the very specific information of exactly how many renewable energy certificates are being retired on Concord's behalf. That's really all I want to show with this slide. There's not too exciting otherwise. So there's been a question about, well, how do you define, what do you mean by non-emitting, renewable, carbon-free? From my perspective, I don't think it's CMLP's place to have its own special definition of what it means by non-emitting, renewable, or carbon-free. We try to be very transparent. We report generation totals by certificate type, as you saw in the other graph we looked at. How many Mass Class 1, how many in Class 2. It says ZEX there because I'm living on another planet where that stands for zero emissions credits, but in Massachusetts, they're really called EFECs, so just ignore that. And we also report totals by generation source type, wind, solar, hydro. NIPA is a specific federal project that we have ownership interest in, or entitlement rights to, I should say. So I don't try to say here that we have our own specific definitions. We want to just report the numbers however the person asking the question wants to see them. Next slide. Here's some information about non-power purchase ways that CMLP is trying to help decarbonize a town. We do have a number of electric vehicle programs that we've created in the last couple of years. They've been pretty successful. We have rewards for encouraging people to charge off-peak and charging at level 2, which enables them to charge more quickly and to be able to limit their charging to off-peak. Over 200 households have taken part in one or more of our EV programs. And by the end of 2021, we will have spent about $100,000 on these. We are getting going on space and water heating rebates, and we've been in the business of providing low rates for certain space and water heating in the past. So far, we've issued $270,000 in air and ground source heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. And I ran the numbers on this, and the lower rates that we charge electric vehicles and electric thermal storage, electric heating systems, those customers save about $350,000 a year in their advantage charging rates. Solar, we saw the 4 megawatts of cumulative capacity on the other slide. That represents about 379 customers. We've spent almost $1.3 million to date supporting solar. And on the energy efficiency front, we supply and offer rebates and supplies to residential and commercial customers for energy efficiency. Since their inception, some of these programs go back to 2010. We've provided about $700,000 in commercial lighting upgrade rebates, $200,000 in residential weatherization, and about $132,000 in LED bulbs. So, we're doing our best in a fiscally responsible way to support the town's carbon reduction goals, both through the power purchase portfolio and our initiatives there, as well as these other programs. And do we have another slide, Dave? Or have we reached? Yep. Oh, this is, I don't want to go through this in detail. This is just a history on exactly what CMLP's solar rebate programs are. The 1, 2, and 3 are the history, and then the current rebate are the 2 underlying programs at the bottom. We actually have 2 programs that support solar right now. We offer, as part of the MLP solar program, we match the $625 per kW DC rebate that the state offers. And then we have our own solar rebate program that provides a one-time incentive of $1,200 per kW DC, capped at $30,000. Oh, I said it back. I said that backwards. Sorry. Yeah. So the MLP solar program is the first one. We pay $600 of that. The state pays $600, and then CMLP has its own program that offers $625 per kW DC in addition to the $1,200 that customers would get from the MLP solar program. And that, I think, is the end of our presentation, but we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
That was very informative. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you so much, Laura and Dave. I want to now open it up to other questions from CAB, and then I guess if you're open to it, Laura and Dave, we could also take some questions from other public attendees.
Yeah, however you want to do it.
Okay, great.
Well, I'll start us off here. First of all, it's an excellent presentation. And one of the things that we benefit from is understanding in a much deeper fashion what CMLP's goals are strategically. I did have a chance to read your much larger piece, Strategic Electrification, and wanted to appreciate from that. I'm wondering if you could take a minute. I'm sure you've read the climate plan that we have with a number of the strategic directions that we're hoping to go in, and that's grounded on where we believe most of the opportunities are with respect to Article 51 that sets goals for the town. And a large part of that foundationally falls within beneficial electrification, a vision of trying to figure out how in the world are we going to electrify the economy? How are we going to electrify our homes and our buildings, since the data we received identifies that, along with transportation, is the largest contributor to our greenhouse gases. So it's where we're putting an emphasis on. Can you speak a little bit, because as I read through the strategic plan that you have, I didn't see a lot about how beneficial electrification is part of that strategy. And frankly, we're struggling. We're trying to figure out how in the world are we going to move off of fossil fuels entirely by 2030 and beyond. And how are we going to electrify these buildings? And we need a lot of help. And it seems to me that with the talent and the vision and the strengths that CMLP has, is there a way that we can do this in a fashion that's going to create that kind of extraordinary transition to clean energy? Long-winded way of saying, this is a big lift and we're wondering how we can do this collectively together. Thanks.
Well, I mean, our strategic plan, which is in need of an update at this point, but it's still, the plan is to electrify cars, heat source, buildings, and we've been putting rebate programs together to incentivize that. We're talking with other departments about, when a building goes up, we need to really, before the building goes up, we need to get in the planning process with them to promote the building being all electric. So we've started that process already with the departments, and I think that's really the first step in getting that to really successfully push on. But we're early on, obviously. We do have some all electric homes now, so it is coming, but it is slow.
Can I ask a question? And I'd also second the fact that was a very useful and very good presentation. And this builds on what Michael was saying. You had the slide of how much you've spent on various rebates and incentives, but it seems to me they fall into some different categories. And you could correct me if I'm wrong about this, but when you provide incentives for energy efficiency, you're doing that for the good of society, and there are real benefits to the homeowner or the building owner, and it does reduce emissions, but it reduces the number of kilowatt hours of electricity you're selling. When you incentivize people to purchase electric cars or to purchase an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump, you are providing some social benefits, but you're also doing something that's going to lead to more sales of electricity to those residents. And especially in the case of electric vehicles, when you provide incentives for people charging off peak, there's benefits to CMLP to doing that. So in addition to those gross numbers for what it's costing you in terms of those incentives, do you have analysis of what really the net cost to CMLP is, considering the fact that you're going to be getting additional electricity sales, and in the case of some of those electric vehicle rebates, you're going to be shifting electricity uses to a time that's beneficial to the light plant?
I would say that a little differently. I'd say it's beneficial to all the ratepayers, because if someone's charging it off peak, it's not hitting our peak. People charging vehicles during the day, during the peak, we would lose a lot of money on that charge. And I don't know, Laura, if you want to speak to that a little bit more, but the rebate, the rebate's good for the customer to incentivize it, but it's also good for us because it helps shape our portfolio and minimize our costs during peaks.
The other thing is, so I understand, I think what the question is that the figures that we talked about on slide 10, and we could bring that slide back up if people wanted to see it, are gross outlay of dollars and don't consider the impact on electric sales and any impact on revenue that change in usage would have. But that goes both ways, because like an energy efficiency, you pointed out, we've spent this money, but we're also losing revenue on those sales. So there's actually a higher cost to energy efficiency than what's listed on this slide. The same is true of solar. We've spent $1.3 million, but we've also lost a lot of sales. So both of those categories, you would need to increase the cost. But you're right, on electric vehicles and on space and water heating, to the extent that somebody is switching from a fossil fuel base over to electricity, that would result in increased sales. So I don't have those figures off the top of my head. That might be something we could put together. What I do have off the top of my head is some analysis we did on electric vehicles that suggested that, as Dave said, if an electric vehicle charged exclusively off-peak, CMLP could expect to earn about $300 in gross margin per year from the electric vehicle. But if they were to charge on peak routinely, we would lose $1,500. So when they charge is really critical to whether it's a net benefit to the light plant or not.
Yeah, good. I mean, in part, that's actually very interesting information. In part, what I was getting at is whether it would make sense for CMLP to be more generous in its incentives, especially for air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps, because it will lead to additional sales, and whether you should be more generous in your incentives to get people to charge their electric vehicles off peak.
Well, we do analysis on our rebates and how we come up with them, and they are pretty aggressive in terms of where we are. With the air source heat pumps and the ground source heat pumps, we followed the state program that other communities have used, and you got to keep in mind that we don't get the state funding that non-MLP towns get. So yeah, we have to really be fiscally responsible with the money that we do have and how we spend it. And I think we've done a good job with that so far.
I think what Warren was really sort of getting at is imagining a future where the fossil fuel industry right now gains revenues by selling gas, right? By selling oil, enormous revenues. What would a world look like if we converted all of that market share into electricity? And it would be kilowatt hours that would be sold, not therms of gas. And the revenue from those kilowatt hours, if there is Laura, as you said, and it would be really interesting to do that analysis, if the gross margin significantly increases the amount of capital that municipal light plant has, taking that capital and putting it back into, as Warren's talking about, into more sustainable energy efficiency models. Because right now we don't have that capital, right? I mean, you're trying to run, deliver, low cost, safe, reliable energy. But if you switch the paradigm, right, and we're basically selling in it three to four times the number of kilowatt hours, doesn't that change the paradigm in terms of the revenue and cost and evaluations that you have done? And that would happen over an analysis that would be looking at every 3 to 5 years, similar to the chart that was shown on Rex, where you would see the increase of revenues as you penetrated that market into an electric economy. And then just add cars to that, and then you even have more revenue. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, but it does. I think it does. I think I understand what you're saying. And I think what Dave was saying is that the premise for some of the rebates that we currently do offer, they were actually like the electric vehicles, they're calculated based on incremental revenue. In other words, we're paying to play. We're paying to ask people to get the electric vehicle. We know if we think we're going to make $300 in gross margin, then we're willing to pay how much, right? And I think in the case of electric vehicles, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but I want to say that we were paying up to $1,500 a vehicle. So that would be 5 years of gross margin we were paying to get people to buy electric vehicles.
And to hope they keep them.
Right.
So, but you did mention the increased revenue. I also think it's important to just remind everyone that there's an increased expense too, because we have to buy that power for those programs. So it's not just money coming in, there's expenses behind it as well.
Right.
Other questions from CAB members?
Yeah,
Go ahead, John.
the other piece is we need to go all electric, right? So it's a matter of how we're going to do that, whether it's a mandate at some point or whatever. But as part of that, you'd also have to be, CMLP would have to be thinking about the distribution system and what upgrades would need to be made there. So I'm wondering if you can say anything about what's the capacity of the existing system to manage greater electrification, and is there a breaking point at which we will have to making new investments in the distribution system?
So we're in pretty good shape capacity wise right now. The substation, the main substation has been upgraded. So I'm not worried about that anytime in the next 5 to 10 years if we were successful. But your point is well taken, because if the whole town is electric, what would that end load be, and how would we address that? Then you'd be talking about new transmission contracts with the investor-owned utilities to get more power in. You'd be talking about an additional substation probably. There's a lot of factors that we have to think about, but we're nowhere near capacity right now. We have plenty of room for, I think probably the next 10 years. But, if things took off tomorrow, we'd have a pretty good feel on what we'd have to do and when we'd have to do it.
Yeah, thanks.
Welcome. Brian Crown's had a question.
Dave, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Well, I actually found the email that has the utility scale solar strategy report from 10 years ago in October. And we actually, the plan was 5 megawatts every 5 years. So actually 6.4 out of 10 years. It's not bad. It's pretty good. And I remember that was, there's not a huge amount of science behind that one. So I think it is worth revisiting.
Yeah.
A couple of questions. I was curious on the overall solar installation rate. It seemed low in recent years. And is that due to timing of the large scale programs, or what do we think are some of the reasons behind that?
So, for last year, the program started late, and it, the first few months of the year, we had no uptake. So I think that was part of this impact. The pandemic probably played a role in it too. And at some point, we're going to get to an area where the people that we're going to put solar in already did it. And I don't know if we're there yet or not. But I think you got to see a couple of years of trend to kind of get an idea where we are. But we will continue to have solar rebates going forward. So see if we can get some more folks on board.
And what % roughly of our total consumption do we think is produced by behind the meter solar, which I know by definition is hard to measure?
That's a tough one. I don't know. I think we've done a little bit of looking into this. Laura?
Yeah, I think Kate may have provided you with a document that was a draft of the budget write-up for the 2021 CMLP budget. And in it, there is a graph there, Brian, and we have tried to estimate what we believe the likely behind the meter storage production has been. And can you bring that up, Kate, or do you? Because, you know, it's the amount of behind the meter production is influenced by both the amount of sun you get in a given year, which does vary year by year, and also, of course, the installed capacity. So what we've done in this chart when we bring it up is we're going to show you the effect of the combination of those two things. Yeah, it's here.
This document, Laura.
Yeah, can you make that any bigger so the chart is easier to read? Or is that not possible?
It is. Let me just, I'm just toggling a few screens here.
And if it's not big enough for folks, they can also go up to view options and do the zoom ratio.
Okay. So the red is what we're estimating behind the meter solar has produced over the last 5 years and what our forecast of next year is. And you can see that it's grown from roughly 3,400 megawatt hours in 2015 to a total that we expect to be closer to 7,300 in 2021.
Great, thanks.
Brian, did you have another question or?
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna go off the rail. So my other question was for RECs that we get with an energy source. So like the dark blue versus the checked blue. Do we think, in the grand scheme of things, in terms of avoiding future emissions, do we think those are equivalent? Like, should we think of those as the same thing, or are they different? Like, is it, do you get more when it's bundled with the source or not? Because I think that's sort of a point of contention among some.
So I think, you know, our goal is to have contracts that come with RECs that we can retire. That's our number one goal. And, you know, we'll continue to look, you know, with our partners to find those, but we also realize that, you know, if something isn't built, we still want to decarbonize the power supply, and that's where the purchase of the RECs come in. So it will be a mix for a little while, but, you know, as you saw in that chart, we went from, you know, 8-9% renewable, you know, or non-emitting, up to, you know, we're going to be around 80% in 2023. So we're active on that, but we do need both options right now.
I'll just say I'm in the camp that buying unbundled RECs doesn't reduce emissions generally. So if you were freed from having to meet goals that push you into buying unbundled RECs, could you see utilizing those funds more for other things that could reduce emissions and have no idea?
So it's a good point. You know, the REC money that we collect annually, the board has made it very clear that that money can be used to purchase RECs, but it also can be used to build a project if we have an opportunity to buy in. So right now we're purchasing RECs, but, you know, as we get further out into the, you know, the 23, 24, 25 calendar years, if we end up having excess money of the money that we're collecting to green up the power supply, that would be something we clearly could put into, you know, a solar project in town or something like that.
Or efficiency or electrification.
Yeah, I mean, there's options, and the board has made it clear that they'll continue to look at that stuff as we move forward.
Thanks.
If there aren't any other questions from CAB, I think I'd like to open questions to other folks from the public, or potentially, I know I see some light board members, which I'm sure you're well aware of this, but if anyone else has questions they want to ask of David and Laura, please raise your hand. I think I can see everyone.
Jake, before we do that, I just want to point out one thing. we do have, you know, a quorum of board members. So if they speak, I would ask them to speak, and they're speaking on their behalf and not the board.
Okay. Understood.
Thank you.
Okay, I see Michael has another question, and then I think Brian has a hand up, and then we'll go to Gilda and Brad. So Michael first.
I think coming back to what you said, Dave, this is more of an open-ended question that I speak by myself, not having counseled with the other board members. And that is that you and your staff have an incredibly awesome job trying to do what you do every day. And I wonder from your experience that if you had a landscape that were different and you controlled many more of the levers, what would you like to see and believe that the light plant, the company, our energy delivery company, could do to address the environmental emergency that we all clearly understand and don't need to have any more whys, but more hows? What's your thought on that?
I would say that is a loaded question.
Yeah.
You know, clearly we only have control over so much right now, right? But if things were, you know, in a perfect world, we'd have, you know, a variety of carbon-free resources that met the timing needs of our energy needs, right? Solar produces during the day, wind predominantly, the high numbers are at night. The hydro is run of the river usually, some pooling. In a perfect world, we'd have a very good combination of that, so that, you know, we are, you know, getting carbon-free power, providing it to the town. And that's really the perfect world, and we're not there yet, right? I would say we're early on in it, but, you know, we're making headway. But that would be a perfect world, is if, you know, our contracts were timed accordingly and it worked for the community needs when they need electricity. And we'll get there at some point. It's just, there needs to be more resources out there. And that's primarily why we do buy the Class 1 RECs, because it's investing into new building of renewable resources.
Great. Thanks so much.
All right, Brian Foltz.
Hi. And yes, I am a light board member, and I'm speaking on my own behalf and not for the board. I have a question about the ZECs or EFECs. You're buying those only when they come bundled with the nuclear contracts. Is that right? You're not buying them additionally?
No.
Correct.
Okay.
Whenever we buy a non-associated REC, it's a Massachusetts Class 1 REC.
That's wonderful. And I also love to hear the fact that you're buying them current year, because buying them current year, as the IOUs do, means that you're competing with them, thus creating a bigger incentive for people to actually build this kind of generation in New England through the Class 1 program. And that just a final clarification, the main Class 2 is again bundled, not bought separately.
Correct.
Okay. On the nuclear contracts, there are multiple contracts. Are they for multiple facilities or a single facility?
Single facility.
Okay, that's it. Thank you. And this has been a great conversation. I'm very excited to hear the questions the board has raised. I think they're wonderful. I am very happy with Dave and Laura and your answers. This has been a wonderful summary of the strategy. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Brad, and then we'll go to Gilda. You're still on mute, Brad. Oh, there you go.
Yes, actually, I think Gilda was first.
Okay, I'm sorry. Gilda, go ahead then.
Okay, Dave, I really appreciate that you were mentioning that other departments need to be involved in electrifying, like you cited the need for new homes to use electrification. And I'm just wondering, I'm a little unclear as to who, who really owns this kind of bigger strategy for how we get homeowners, businesses to electrify. Like, is that the light plant? Is it like who? Because it's heavy lifting. So I'm just wondering who's responsible.
Yeah, I think there's not one good answer to that, Gilda. I think, we've been an asset of helping along the way with this, but it's going to take more than just the light department to electrify all the homes in town, businesses. And, we've worked closely with Kate on this, and I think it's more of a ownership of the town, not any one department. I think it's going to be multiple departments working together to make that work. But that's my opinion on it. It's and that's my view on it as well. But I think that's what we've been doing on this stuff. We've worked closely with Kate on a number of things, and we'll continue to do that. That's really the goal.
Okay.
And I think the climate action plan reflects that, there's multiple town departments as well as the light plan and kind of the community overall have to, and CAB has to help as well where we can to try and drive awareness and, to drive people to asking about electrification and exploring it, without just moving from, their current approach to like going straight to gas from oil, right? There's opportunities there. And I think we have to try and collaborate. I don't know if Kate, if you want to add anything else to that.
No, I think you both captured it well, and the climate action plan reflects that, especially when it comes to electrification, there's multiple stakeholders that are required to make this happen, and a lot of community engagement, and even all the steps in the climate action plan are just the start and just what we need to do the next 5 years. And there's going to be a lot more work to do. It's really all hands on deck.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Brad, you're up.
Brad Hubbard Nelson from CSEC. And so CSEC is thinking a lot about this as well, and we'll be talking about it at our meeting tomorrow afternoon, in case anybody is interested to listen. We're thinking about what sort of program we need for really getting electrification accelerated. I wanted to say that was a great presentation, great work about CMLP, and I appreciate that. It seems to me that one of the biggest opportunities for filling up some of the supply with non-emitting is commercial and canopy solar. And I don't see any of that happening yet in Concord, although I see it in some other places. What could we do to encourage that more? Is that just going to be too expensive for us?
It is expensive. There's no question about it. But I'll go back to the comment I made earlier about battery storage, utility.
Yeah.
That's really what we need to do next, so that we can continue to add things like, canopy storage. I mean, solar rather, that you're referring to. But right now we have to be careful. And Laura and I are really focused on utility scale battery.
But if you get someone to build a canopy and put in the storage at the same time, why isn't that happening? Is that just not economic yet?
Yeah, that's the problem. We've had some people come to us and, they wanted to put in a decent size array, and we said, if you're going to do that, we need a battery on it. And right now the economics aren't there for that. Hopefully they will be at some point, but we're looking at a number of different options for the light department in general. We're looking at potential PPA lease, purchasing outright, those sort of things. And for us, that's gonna make me feel a lot better when we do have one of those on, because when we have those days where we're really low,
Of course.
all it's going to take is one car accident and power's going to go out all across town. And that's what scares me, to be honest.
How much more solar would get us to the point where are we at the max that we could be without causing problems at the minimum? Or
So that's a complicated question, and I keep it simple. We have two main transformers in town. One feeds half the town, the other feeds the other half. Each transformer can feed the entire town, but one of the transformers during that solar saturation period, just this past fall, was carrying about 1.7 megawatts of load. And so that's less than a circuit size. So, you know, again, if you have an outage on that circuit, then the substation, it's just the nature of it. So we're there on one transformer. The other transformer, we have a little wiggle room still.
thanks.
Yep.
Jake, we have a couple virtual hands up from Linda and Pamela.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Linda and Pamela, and then I saw Laura's actual hand go up as well. Thank you for cluing me in. I missed those virtual hands. So who was first? I'm sorry, Kate.
I think Linda was first. So maybe
Okay.
Linda, Pamela, Laura.
Okay, thanks. Linda, go ahead.
Hi, I think Brad kind of addressed the question that I wanted to ask. I missed some of it because I was kicking somebody out of the bedroom here. I was wanting to know more about like the balance that you have, like trying to balance like the increase in electricity usage by electrifying everything and electricity generation and like large scale projects like solar and battery. And it seems like it obviously needs course, like Gilda was indicating, careful coordination with larger entities in town. I'm just wondering, like, how does that work? Like if someone's going to build, like, for example, the middle school or some big building, do they have to go through you and the planning board to let you know ahead of time that they're going to be drawing so much power and what you would recommend? I mean, wouldn't it be better if all these buildings were net zero to begin with?
So I've been working with them on the middle school, for an example, and you know, what we can do over there. So the good thing is on projects like that, we're getting notified early enough that we can bring this information to them while they're designing the building. Where it's a little bit more difficult is in the residential side, when someone just goes to build a house and then they find out about our stuff after the fact. That's the area that we're working on making adjustments so that the builders get the information when they come and pull out a permit saying, hey, we'd like you to go all electric, and you know, here's some incentives to do so. So that's an area that we need to really focus on, and we will, and we've started that. But it's a tough sell too, right? You know, the whole you heat your house with electricity mentality. If you talk to any real estate agent, they cringe when you say that. It's an educational piece that we have to do, you know, as we move forward, and we're doing that, and we're getting some uptake, but we want to see even a greater level of uptake. I don't know if I answered all your question, but.
Thanks, Linda. Okay, we'll move to Pam. Pamela, I think you're on mute. There we go.
Sorry, finding the question. Why can't we make sure that the middle school, since it's new construction, is A, net zero, B, includes storage, as well as solar and is all electric?
So
because could we? Why can't we?
That's what we're working on. Pamela, we've been working on that. I've met with a number of people. There's a plan in place. You know, it hasn't been adopted by the committee, but it will be presented to them. So what you just said is what we've been working on to a T.
Hey, thank you. And by the way, thank you for all of this. It's really wonderful and fascinating. And And in the future, as we get more efficient buildings, which reduces the electric sales, and we get more electric buildings, which increases the electric sales, and we get more electric vehicles, which increases the electric sales, and we install more residential solar, which drastically reduces electric sales, could we end up generating most of Concord's energy needs locally through homeowner solar installations and through local solar installations, where CMLP does mostly just distribution, infrastructure maintenance, and storage rather than selling power? I applaud your attempts at balancing this transition to non-fossil fuel-based energy, because I realize it's a big balance between growing and restricting the energy use. But we can't get to that future where it's all electric and it's mostly solar generated locally until we've got battery storage, right?
That's partially, yes. And solar only produces during certain times of the day, and a battery is only going to last for so long. So we wouldn't be able to provide Concord with 100% solar around the clock. It's just not feasible. There'd have to be other resources in there as well.
Right, but with batteries and with electric vehicles that can plug into the grid too, that might be also helpful, because we'll have our little storages running around on the streets, and like the electric school buses, which would be mobile storage units, right?
Yeah, I think, not to get into too deep, but, most batteries have a, discharge hour, of like, 3 to 4 hours. So again, you're going to have some diversity to make this work. And that's the balancing act that Laura and I look at on a regular basis when we come to these contracts and that sort of thing.
There's every new building, new development that comes in, we can't require them to be electric or net zero or anything like that. We can't even require them to do all electric because Massachusetts sets the laws. Is there ways that you can incentivize them and work with every developer that comes in to point out the financial benefits of going all electric?
That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, get in front of the builders and construction before the design is done. And that's the part that's a tricky piece. If we get there too late, they're not going to change it. Understand
what about the big one that's coming in on Main Street? And that's the last, I'll shut up then.
You talking the one up in the nuclear metals area? ScarMet?
No, the one that's on Commonwealth Ave, 13 something Commonwealth, 1440 Commonwealth Ave, where they were going to do the planned residential development. They thumbed their nose at the town for being too obstreperous, and now they're putting McMansion farms in.
Yeah, I have to look at that. I don't have the information directly in front of me.
I mean, do you get to talk to them at all?
Thanks, Pamela. I'm just gonna, just to be cognizant of time, and we have a number of other folks who have their hands up still. So I'm gonna move to Laura, and then we'll go to Warren.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. It was incredibly helpful. I was wondering if there are any plans in place to create
put that on the
home storage.
Put that on the top of the table and eat.
I know they're quite high right now, so are expected to come down in the coming years.
I didn't catch all of that.
Sorry. Home battery storage systems. As the prices come down, does CMLP have plans to create incentives for homeowners to install residential battery systems, especially if they have solar already?
Yeah,
say something about that, Dave.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, right now the home batteries are still quite a bit more expensive than utility scale on a per kW basis, but they do provide some additional benefits that utility scale battery doesn't provide. There are more benefits to the homeowners, including resilience and potentially the deferment of electric infrastructure if they want to add a bunch of electric vehicles, or, you know, a lot of load. You know, if they don't have a battery and a way to manage it, they would need bigger infrastructure. So we're definitely looking at that. One of the things that is on CMLP's plate that is also part of our strategic plan is to move to something called time of use rates. Right now, when you use electricity at CMLP, what you pay for the electricity depends on how much you use per month. If you use a little bit, you pay a smaller rate. If you use more, you pay a larger rate. If we were to shift to time of use rates, you would no longer be charged on how much you use, but on when you use it. So there would be much advantaged rates, much lower rates for the lowest price periods of the day, and much higher rates for the high price periods of the day. So this helps pay for home batteries, because people who install them can then essentially buy their extra energy when it's cheap and then discharge it later, thereby not having to buy it from CMLP when it's expensive. So we view that as very beneficial to helping pay for home storage. We're not quite there yet. It'll be something that'll be discussed at the CMLP board level, I think probably in 2021. So if you have an interest in that, you might think about attending their meetings, although they're at 7:30 in the morning and not at night. But yeah, so that's what all I wanted to say, Dave. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. Thank you.
You actually answered my second question, which was about the way that your rates are currently structured. I am one of your all-electric homeowners, and so I obviously pay a lot of tier 3 prices at the moment. So that was really helpful. I will definitely make that meeting about time of use rates. And do you have any sense of when the rollout for that kind of structure would be?
Well, actually, we do have a time of use rate today that you could be on. We don't have very many customers who use it for their whole house. Many people use it for charging electric vehicles in particular, but you would have the option if you wanted to go on that rate. So that's something you could look into. And if you need more information, you could just email me or call me or something.
Thank you. Evidence of the fact that even if you spend your entire life thinking about this stuff, you can't figure it all out.
Yeah.
I'll just add that the light plant incentive, which is really great with the state support, and then the additional on top of that incentive, you can actually use that if you are going new to going solar and you add storage, even though that affects your overall economics, it can help reduce the cost of the battery system and kind of make the overall package a bit more affordable. Then when you tie it into the time of use rates, that really amplifies the benefits that you can get with having the battery system. So thank you for signing up for that program. It's been great. It's helpful for me. All right, sorry for that aside. We'll head on over to Warren. I know we're at 7:46 and want to make sure we also include any other additional comments in the time we have remaining. But Warren, go ahead.
First of all, that's great, Laura, that you're thinking so seriously about time of use rates. It would be really great if the town could move in that direction. But the thing I wanted to ask about was the graph that you showed that showed the year by year total energy use for the town. And I was surprised how much that varied, and especially how much it's gone down since 2016. How much of that can be attributed to weather? And if not weather, what accounts for the other variations?
Laura, you're muted.
That's the way people like me best anyway, muted. So if we go back to that chart, I don't know if I mentioned it when we were looking at it, but there On the right axis is something called degree days. And that's what the purple line is. This is the total number of degree days in that year. So in 2015, there were a total of, you have to scroll down a little bit, Kate, for me to see the bottom number on the data table. There were 6,606 degree days in that year. Whereas look at the very next year in 2016, there was a steep drop in the weather. Okay, it was either not as cold or not as hot or both. There were only 6,047 degree days in that year. So this purple line gives you some idea of how much of the increase or decline is due to the weather. And you can see it's a pretty good fit. Like, look at the years that have higher degree days, 2018 and 2015, and they have higher usage. And so far this year has actually been the lowest degree day year in recent history. It looks like we're only going to end up with about 5,750 degree days. That's assuming normal weather for the rest of December. And look how low the load is. It's correspondingly the lowest load on record. So the weather has a very big role to play in what the overall total sales are. I will say, though, that we have also lost some load between 2015, especially, and like 2017. That was due to likely to energy efficiency.
Thank you.
Any other questions? On any topics, not just light plant related. All right, well, I think I would like to get someone to propose that we adjourn the meeting a little bit early here and then take a vote on that, not seeing any additional questions.
Jake, real quick, I just want to thank you guys for having us. I think it was helpful. It was a good dialogue, and we'd be willing to come on again at some point if you want an update.
Absolutely, Dave and Laura, both. Thank you so much. I know you heard a lot of feedback from everyone on the call that this has been super helpful. And I know we've been talking about, connecting and learning more. And I really appreciate the time you're spent, this evening with us. I know everyone else does as well. So can I get a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Ruthie.
Yep.
Can I get a second? Thank you, Brian. All right, all the CAB members. All right, meeting is officially adjourned. Thanks again to everyone. Happy holidays all.
Happy
Take care
holidays.
in the snow. Enjoy it.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Wow.
Bye, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.